We all have a dark side in each and every one of us. We have a dark side and a good side. But what if we could separate the two to where you always had a dark side out and you always had a good side out? Well, Robert Louis Stevenson explored this idea in his The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And there have been quite a bit of movies. I think there may have been even a TV show about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But tonight we are looking at actually the first Oscar winner that a horror picture ever received. And so tonight we're reviewing Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the one that came out in 1931, starring Fredric March. So it has Fredric March, Miriam Hopkins, and also I want to mention Rose Hobart, because it's either Hobart or Hobart, I'm not sure, but I want to mention her because honestly, in my opinion, she stole the show away from Miriam Hopkins. She was only the side girl in the film, but she was just outstanding at the role that she was given. I don't know if you all know the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, if you've read the book or not. I actually had the pleasure of reading the book last year around Halloween, and I ended up being Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde for Halloween. I have pictures of it actually, but I love the story. However, if you're looking for a movie that stays close to the book, I would not recommend this one. There's a lot of differences. But so I want to first start off by saying I mentioned that it won an Oscar, and the reason it won an Oscar was Fredric March. He won Best Actor in a leading role, of course, and he was outstanding. He's just made this movie unforgettable, honestly. The film starts out in a very, very interesting way. In fact, there are a lot of things that I thought were definitely ahead of its time, considering it was 1931. The movie starts out in a point of view perspective from Dr. Jekyll. So right off the bat, you're just kind of walking around a room, and there's this shot where Dr. Jekyll looks into the mirror. He sees himself, and so okay, we're going along in the perspective of Dr. Jekyll, and it's very interesting. I don't know how they did the whole mirror thing without showing the camera, to be honest. I don't know. I'm not the type I don't like to read about how they do special effects in movies, because I like to keep the movie magic a secret, to be honest. But I did read about how they did the Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde transformations, but I'm honestly not going to get into all that because, I don't know, I feel like it takes away from the movie magic. But if you're curious, definitely go read about it. So the plot of the story, I mentioned a scientist. He thinks there's a way that he can separate the moral feelings from the immoral feelings, the evil from the good inside each and every person through a potion. He finally believes he's solved the problem. He knows how to do it. He has the potion in his hand, and you can find this scene on YouTube, the first transformation into Mr. Hyde. I think it's one of the best. It's one of the most historical scenes, I think, in movie history. So he takes the potion, and oh my God, Fredric March's acting when he's transforming into Mr. Hyde, and the effects that they did were just phenomenal. And you'll notice right away that how they made Mr. Hyde look in this film is very Neanderthal, and they were going for that. They wanted him to look kind of like that primal man that doesn't have any moral feelings So he kind of looks like a caveman. But right off the back, I noticed that Fredric March's energy in this movie was just incredible. The way he acted when he was Mr. Hyde, it was like he was a completely different person. He certainly deserved the Oscar for this picture. His voice changed, his movements changed. Just everything about him changed, which is the whole point of the movie, to be two separate people. And during the during the transformation scenes, you can hear a heart beating very loudly, and apparently this heartbeat was the director's heartbeat. What he would do is he ran up and down stairs for about 2 minutes, and then they recorded his heartbeat, and that's what they used for that little sound effect. But as I said, March's energy and performance was so entertaining to watch. Now, I mentioned this actress, Rose Hobart. I'm just going to call her Hobart because I don't know how to pronounce her name exactly. And she plays I believe she's a prostitute. She may be just a tavern girl, but I don't know. She seemed like a prostitute. And it's important to note that this film was made pre-code era, so there weren't many restrictions. And I didn't really notice this until there's a scene where this is earlier in the film, so it's not really a spoiler alert, but Dr. Jekyll is checking up on this girl because she was just being attacked by a man, and she puts his hand like on her inner thigh, and I was like, oh my god, is this a classic or is this a modern film? But she does that, and then she undresses in front of him, and I believe she's nude in her bed, but she has the bed sheet on her. But I was just thinking, oh my god, this is pretty ahead of its time. This is some rated R stuff for back then. And there's this scene where she sways her leg back and forth. There's so many interesting things that the director did in this film. She swings it back and forth, and you'll see it later in the film. And another technique that the director did that haven't really seen in other films is there are parts where he will split the screen to where, like, on this side it'll be Miriam Hopkins' character, and on this side it'll be Rose Hobart's character. And it's kind of like 24, the television show, where you see two things going on at the same time. I thought that was a very interesting technique as well. But the one scene that I truly want to note of the film that really stood out to me was Mr. Hyde. It's when you see how much of a monster he is, and it's hard to believe it's Fredric March, but he is basically raping Rose Hobart's character. And of course you don't see the rape, but it's everything up to it. He's just so abusive to her, and her acting is incredible. Every time you see Mr. Hyde come into her place, you feel like, oh my god, she's about to go through this again. And it was just such an intense scene between the two. And this is the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde film that I've always wanted to see. This is the Mr. Hyde that I always imagine, hopping or running around the streets of London, dodging policemen, running, jumping, and just very stunts. There were a lot of stunts like this. This is the monster I was looking for in Mr. Hyde. The movie was actually a huge success. It cost, I believe, about $500,000 to make, which was a lot back then. And they made about $1.25 million. This was a Paramount picture. And it definitely, honestly, I've seen all the Universal monster movies, but this one was just wow. Frankenstein is great, but comparing this to something like The Invisible Man, which I love that too, this movie was just a little bit above those horror classics in my opinion. I just enjoyed it so much. I thought it was ahead of its time in a lot of ways. But I know that John Barrymore has a silent film. I haven't seen that, and he was actually asked to be Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in this movie, but he was unable to do it because he was under contract with another studio at the time. So we got Fredric March doing it. It launched his career a little bit, and he did a performance that I will never forget. And I think I'm going to start watching this movie every year around this time, every October. But that's it for tonight, guys. Please watch it. It was definitely great. See this movie, and have a good night.